welcome to Worktrees. I'm Jack Bogdan, the creator of Click and Recursive.
And I'm Chris Messina, the inventor of the hashtag.
And we've got a bunch of demo stuff today. So we're going to show off
real things we've been building.
Lots of building. And we can unpack what we've learned along the way. But before we get into our demo, there's an interesting discussion happening around Raycast 2.0 and this big overhaul to their architecture, which I know you're incredibly deep in. So why don't you give your kind of high level on your experience at 2.0 so far and some of what the discussion's been?
Yeah, totally. Of course, Raycast is a launcher for the Mac. It's also now in Windows and iOS. So one of the big long arcs for Raycast has been increasing the surface area in which it provides its product to different cohorts of users. And so if you're like a Raycast Mac user, like a diehard user that's been on the Mac from the beginning, any deviation from being the golden child in that relationship feels like you're being spurned. And there is quite a bit of angst within the Raycast ecosystem. First, there was the Windows beta, and so Mac was set aside. Then there's kind of been quietly in the background Raycast for iOS. There's some users, but it's not like, a breakaway hit. This tension between Raycast being a Mac child versus being multi-platform has caused some anxiety, which is now coming into clarity because of the way in which Raycast is not a native Mac app. And with 2.0 specifically, they've done a bunch of new architecture development to anticipate the future and to build a more stable foundation that takes years of experience and bakes it into this product and platform. And so there's a discourse around how you lose a bunch of things as a result of not being purely Mac native and having React or a server or Node in the mix, and why that's not great. Raycast and the team also decided to put out a technical blog post describing the underlying architecture. Now, I have not read that piece yet, but Jack, I know you have. From an architecture perspective and the product you're building with Recursive, I think you have insights that speak to the speed with which you can build, especially agentically, and maybe you have some insights into why they're taking this approach.
Okay, so I actually live in both worlds because I have a fully Mac and iOS native browser with Click, and then I have a fully web-based architecture for Recursive, for coding and more. And both are actually like the first substantial projects I've taken on in both architectures. So I'm suddenly starting to kind of see the benefits and the pain points of each. And so one, given that Raycast's ambitions are cross-platform, completely understand the move to web-based architecture. The initial feedback is a lot of historical connection to being Mac first. There's a very strong Mac community. If you're trying to scale as a business that has the number of employees that they have and has to make money, obviously you need to go multi-platform. And it's very difficult to maintain multi-platform development in native. There's just a lot of overhead.
I think it's worth bringing up the browser company of New York tried to do with Arc. Originally, they were building Swift for Windows, either as a moat or as a bridge, so they could write Swift code, and then it would be ported over to Windows.
That's fucking crazy. That is an insane thing to do, that they actually decided that was the right strategy.
Sometimes you do need to have those moonshots or Mars shots in order to get to something that's valuable and unique, but it is a great question. And I don't think there's been enough analysis on it as to whether or not that decision really imperiled the fate of the company. If, let's say, Raycast and the browser company of New York had collaborated on like Swift for Windows, would that have actually helped and moved it further forward? Or does it make more sense, I think as you're discovering perhaps, as to the benefits of the web platform relative to building natively?
Swift for Windows is its own company. If that's your thing and that's you're going to work on, that's a massive undertaking, right? So if that's not the goal of your company and your goal is to actually just have a multi-platform app, then using web technology makes a ton of sense. Now, the trade-offs, and I think the things people are worried about, which were somewhat covered in the write-up, which is, if you can't visually tell that it's not native, because I think that's kind of the hard artistic part of how do you get the web tech to feel super clean.
And to be clear, Raycast 2.0 feels like a native Mac app. They've done an amazing job of actually getting it there so that you're not thinking that this is some lame Electron app using web primitives at the desktop
And by the
layer.
way, they're not an Electron app. And I think that's really important.
Right.
So a lot of people, I think if it was a straight Electron app, I think people would be way pissed because as I've learned, the memory overhead on Electron apps is insane because you're essentially running a full Chromium build. And so they even mentioned in the article, one of the things they did first as a test was to add, I believe, the notes feature entirely as a web-based feature in the native app to see if anybody could tell. Like it was actually like a smoke test.
I see.
To see if anybody could figure out whether they could do it. And no one said anything or could really tell. This post is so interesting and powerful. And I love that they shared it because it really, it totally explains how they're approaching Glaze, which is their app builder platform.
Right.
There was one of the things that they did is they built their own hosts. They built their own hosts. So it's not, again, rather than Chromium, they built their own wrappers. And those wrappers are essentially the translation layers for all of the platform-specific elements. So I think last time we spoke on Glaze, it was Mac only. It's totally going multi-platform because they are testing it with their own app, which is the exact right way to do it. They're just going to dog food in their own tools.
Wait. So what you're saying is, I guess if we imagine far enough in the future that Raycast 2.0 could be built with Glaze. And so therefore, what was like the parent app or the flagship app eventually will be something that Glaze ends up being able to produce.
I think there's a lot of specifics around slicing that and like the depth that you can get. But I think the core of what will likely happen is that
well, let's give it like a 5-year journey. Like ambitiously, you can say if that is possible. They started with like the Notes app, and now it's like, what about Raycast itself? That's a very fascinating kind of like
I
thought.
wouldn't be surprised if the Glaze SDK is essentially the thing that is their core tech stack for everything, right? I would not be surprised if Raycast is obviously not made in Glaze, right? It's coded like traditional apps, but it's using a lot of the...
But the backgrounds, the architecture, all the components that basically every time you create a Glaze app, essentially has the same underlying structural components that like Raycast 2.0 has.
I would not be shocked if that's essentially what they're doing. And to try and get, because they haven't fully forced Raycast 2.0 as the only version because it's not feature parity. They don't have feature parity. So I would not be shocked if they're just working to get to feature parity and at the same time building up all the abstractions that they need in their wrapper for Glaze to basically get access to anything that seems more system specific or deeper in the architecture. So I think this is really cool. I with Recursive, which I'll get into in a minute, I'm using Electrobun. So I'm not custom writing my own wrapper. There is a wrapper available that uses native web UI, or web views, I should say, per platform. And so it can compile to Windows and Linux and Mac. This is super cool. I think if you do it well and you can't tell, right? The things that you might lose are copious amounts of liquid glass in your UI, right? Things like that. We're getting like special things you can't do in web tech. And then the other downside, there's like a 200 megabyte overage on memory usage, which for modern systems is really not that bad.
I find it's strange. On Reddit, I see so many screenshots of people going into Activity Monitor and grabbing, it's taking up multi-hundred megabytes of memory. And I'm kind of like, I don't know that that's the valuable thing anymore. Yes, number goes up, but modern systems are quite savvy at managing memory pretty well. I guess I wonder, for all the people that complain about it, are they actually seeing performance degradation? Or is it just, I don't like how big this number is, therefore I'm going to complain about it?
Well, I think both can be true. So memory management is still really important.
But I think Electron feels, I'm misstating this, but feels pretty legacy in some ways at this point. Electrobun and Rust and Tori, there are these platforms that are more memory savvy. Electron just feels like it's bloatware that kind of has seen its time.
It's a big trade-off either way, and you have to manage how you're going to be deploying and where you're adopting different parts of the stack and kind of not necessarily locking yourself in because you're not really locked into anything anymore, but you're still making an architectural decision that might...
It's still, there's some sunk cost and there's tooling and then there's ecosystem and community.
Correct.
It's one of those important things, and they mentioned this in the post. It's much harder to hire Swift-only engineers than it is to hire TypeScript and React and people that build web apps because the web is such a larger surface area, which by design and definition is cross-platform. The web is on all platforms, Linux included. And so therefore, in terms of finding skilled engineers, there's just more of those around than there are native app developers.
It's 100% true. And as somebody who is not technically trained as an engineer and has both platforms up and running,
right.
I think the world is changing so fast that that part of the equation may or may not matter as much going forward.
Interesting. Yeah.
Why don't I show you a little bit of Recursive? Because you...
Yeah, let's jump in there.
And then I can kind of...
Because again, and for the audience, you started building a native Mac web browser, and then you added iOS to it, and that was like relatively straightforward. Then you even built it for like Apple Watch. And so you're using all these like native Apple technologies. And then you're like, how do I build a tool to help me build this stuff better? And then that's when you decided to use web technologies. And so I'd love to like know about some like the tool chain elements and what you're finding in terms of your coding agents and assistants and how savvy they are working in one realm or another. But I'll just tell you that this project that I worked on over the weekend, which is a native Swift app, Claude Opus 4.7 is great, but really it's not as savvy when dealing with Apple technologies compared with TypeScript and things like that.
I think with Click, I did so much foundational work in the wilderness, getting things working, that there are patterns to reference now. I'm going to show you something that I've been doing with Recursive, which is very recursive with Click, and it's completely changing the way I'm building anything. So let's maybe dig into that for a second.
All right, let's jump in.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we're back in Recursive.
We're back in Recursive.
And so we're looking at.
Let me give you like a really high level here. So again, Recursive is essentially it's a kind of like new age agentic IDE, but it's super composable. So it's got a plugin system that kind of powers a series of MCP servers, the actual adapters that connect to different agent harnesses, so Claude Code, Codex, Cursor CLI, Gemini, etc. Rules, skills, basically everything is super plug and play. And
everything connects to everything.
Exactly, and I'm dog fooding this. So the adapters for Claude Code, these are all basically, if you're going to use Codex inside of Recursive, it's a plugin, and I just update the plugin. So if you want to add your own for a different provider that I don't currently support, you can just unblock yourself and literally ask for it. And that became kind of like a beacon of how do I just get a really strong foundation around how this is set up so that it becomes really flexible to build on top of and expand. And I don't know if you saw Composer 2.5 from Cursor dropped 20 minutes ago. I've been playing with it, and it's fantastic, by the way. It's really, really good.
Wow, awesome.
But I wanted that flexibility to say, hey, there's a cool new model. I want to just be able to just select it and start putting it through its paces, sometimes even within the same session. I'll show you something that's is a little unique here is essentially you can have different projects. So you can connect Recursive up to as many repos as you want.
Is that a requirement? Essentially, how are projects scoped? Is it within a folder that's a local directory, or is it connecting to some GitHub repo?
It's always a local directory that has a Git connection. So, it's something that is setting up Git essentially for the work. I'm jumping back and forth between a bunch of different contexts and different projects to build things out along the way. And I get a bunch of really cool tools now out of the box. I've got my Git graph. I can load local hosts. In fact, if I open Recursive, something you'll see that's fun is you can see Recursive in Recursive. So this is the actual. This is the same server. It's loading itself, which is really cool. And I can go in and I can make edits and I can do design changes and I can preview mobile, more of a direct mobile UI. And this is all responsive, so it'll update as I go. File tree, terminals, I basically go in the whole 9 yards on what I can. I've also custom built tools for myself that I just load as a plugin. So for example, with Xcode, I've got Click Browser on my machine. This is really cool. I have a script hooked up to Click that when it runs a build in the derived folder, it automatically updates that build on disk here, and I can one-click install that build to my phone, which I can also do from my phone because Recursive Recursive has full tunneling, so I can basically connect from my phone like an app, and I can see everything live connected here. So it's really really cool. I also have a full task board. So you can see I've got all the different tasks that can kind of run through.
And this is your own local task management thing, or is this connected to Linear or Jira?
No, it's all,
or it could be.
No, it's all, at least right now, it's all just local and there's no connection to anything else.
Cool.
It's all saving as files. I think that's one other thing to call out. It's just a file and a folder structure, so you have access to all of it. And it also means that with files as a source of truth, it's really easy to do handoffs between different agents and different contexts.
Are you able to attach attachments to any of those tasks? Because that's the one thing that I'm dealing with Claude. Right. Claude wants to create its own task system, but I'm like, I have screenshots. So how do I? Here.
Yeah, you can literally drag and drop attachments and add whatever you want, and they show up as attachments.
And where and how are they stored?
They're stored as the raw file in the session folder.
Sure.
I've got, this is my dev environment, so there's a bunch of work stuff here. But you can see, for example, I've got like reminders of sessions that I wanted to come back to. Click is checking crash logs automatically from App Store Connect. So it'll go and pull those and then run the analysis. And that's all just running on an automation. And it just basically, it's nothing more than instructions in a markdown. It's not that complex. But you pick if it's limited to one product or any project, and then you can pick what model you want to use from any provider. And you can schedule at an interval, or you can have it daily at a certain time. So it's really, it's meant to be really flexible and simple to kind of get set up. But it's been super powerful. And the thing that I've been learning along the way is, one, it's really fun to make something that you're using to make itself. That aspect of, I'm using the tool to improve itself, that I'm taking that into Click as well. So I'll kind of like unpack this for a second, but this is a really long running session that's basically trying to solve some performance issues with window resizing and sidebar resizing in Click.
Oh, yes. I've experienced this.
That benchmarking is really incredibly difficult to do over and over again, because with Apple's kind of out-of-the-box options, you're using this tool called Instruments. It's really technical, and it's like needle in a haystack. It's not really set up for agentic analysis. Click has an MCP server. And so I've essentially extended Click's MCP to add all the logging surfaces that I would need so that I can run something like start a responsiveness benchmark, where it says for 30 seconds, go and reproduce essentially what's causing your issue. It pulls the report, and there's a bunch of additional actual logging files that go with that, and it pulls that from my machine, and then it goes ahead and basically runs that analysis, tells me where those issues are coming from, and it basically is just one more loop to go and solve.
So it's like a Ralph Wiggum
completely,
kind of loop.
Yeah. But it's within Click and Recursive as like a combo. So Click enables it because it's essentially extending itself. Recursive knows to extend Click to give it the surface that it needs for visibility into those metrics, and then it can basically Wiggum its way to solutions.
I think that it should be a verb.
Yes. So it's been really amazing, and I'm actually solving problems that I've run into for months and have been plaguing me. One is Apple has consistently rejected the last few Click builds because there's just been this horrible bug I've not been able to figure out for new installs, where it would just immediately crash on load. And so I couldn't figure out what to do, and I only have this machine to validate with. So I iterated with Recursive on that the other day, and it set up a VM, it set up a pipeline to do the builds on my main machine using my build script, copy those builds directly into the VM with trace logging, and basically just kind of, install the app itself from scratch and validate that everything is working. And it ran that again until it fixed the problem.
Wow. So what was it? Did you figure out what it was?
Yes, but I'm not going to go into the long tail details of it. It's always,
that's fine.
The answer is it's always a race condition. It was something was requesting access to iCloud before it needed to. And when Apple validates, they validate on machines with no iCloud connected to them. And that breaks the whole flow. It had broken the whole flow. And so this VM was set up with no iCloud account, so it was able to chase it down. It's just been really exciting to kind of go through and play with different UI elements that that are really useful for me. Like one, for example, is just having quick access to everything that's happened in a session in one place here. So I can like easily open my plans. I can see any edited files and pop those open, and it'll go through and show me the diff for the actual file, and I can see file history and when those were changed or committed. So, but just getting to the place where it's been super powerful.
One of the things I was wondering is whether or not recursive makes sense from a 0 to 1 process, or from once you get to a 0.9 alpha, do you then jump into recursive? I've been wanting to build this app for a long time that automates a lot of the manual sleuthing that I would typically do to find out what's going on in different apps. For a long time, apps would update in the App Store and say things like bug fixes and performance updates or whatever. And so they wouldn't actually talk about what had changed. And that always annoyed the piss out of me because I'm like, I want to know what's going on. And so I developed a number of manual techniques for looking into what are called IPA files, these iPhone apps. Essentially, an iPhone app is just a zip file. And so you can unzip the file, and then essentially you perform a diff and you look into different places to find out what's being built. I had that core concept, and I just wanted to create an app that I could drop 1 or 2 IPAs onto. And one, it would automatically decompile the IPA and put things in a logical folder structure where I could go take a look. And then second, it would produce a report of what it found. And then third, I could actually send essentially a discoveries.json file of all the new things that were in there up to an AI model, and it would generate a narrative to explain what likely might be happening. And so that was the project that I started, I think, on Thursday or Friday, and essentially used this superpowers skill to generate the plan and go back and forth till finally we had, I think, 8 or 9 phases of development. I went into Claude Code, kind of gave it the plan, and just had it perform and execute. And right before we checked in the commit for each phase, I'd go over to Codex and have Codex do a review on all the code that had been written. And it found a bunch of things. And then I'd hand it over to Opus, and then Opus would fix it. And then we move forward. And so I've arrived at a place where I have a functioning app. It more or less does the thing that I want. What it generates is garbage. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. However, I have the working like flow and process. And so, as I mentioned before, my issue now is I want to provide feedback, to Opus to fix these things. I need to create screenshots because the UI that it generated is garbage. I kind of want to jump into recursive now because it feels like what you have are all the right things that would help Opus stay on target, get the right analysis of the bugs or the UI flows or things like that. And then I could choose which models I want to use based on the type of thing that I'm trying to build. Should I have started in recursive to build this, or is it now a great harness to then start to do subsequent development over time?
I've done both. I've gone 0 to 1 on stuff in recursive, and then I've also obviously been iterating on stuff that has long been, there before recursive, like Click. I think the big unlocks for me have really been model choice and total flexibility in provider. And you can use something like a cursor agent or something that gives you model choice, but you're still locked into that as your main provider. Yeah. And the reality is, I'm sure I'm not alone in this. Like, I pay for multiple providers, and so I'd like to get my money's worth across the spectrum of providers.
Same. That's right.
And so having that freedom without losing the raw data has been really impactful. Everything is really cleanly organized by the sessions that are started, regardless of whether you're the one starting them or an agent just wakes up and starts working on them, or a sub-agent kicks off and does it. All of that context around what those sessions touched and every file that they edited is totally retained in the session folder. There's actually a complete hunk log of every hunk changed and snapshot
all these hunks
from the files, which is so useful because when I do,
are these diffs, or like what is the content of these hunks?
It's basically a tiny diff. It's like this line and then there's changes here. Basically, when I run an autonomous commit flow, the last step has been updated to call this recursive tool, which goes and actually pulls the session context and the file change context per session before it does the commit. So you have this like granularity. And when it stages files for the commit, because it does atomic commits, so it breaks it out by context. working in the same file doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the same thing. Sometimes that file might touch 3 subsystems, and you don't want to just commit that one file in that one commit, because then you're actually muddying your long-term context.
Specifically, you're looking for an audit log to say, this thing changed as related to this piece of work, or maybe a ticket or something like that. And that's the thing that weaves it together.
Totally, exactly. The interesting thing too is because the session data has all of the changes over time, I've also run into situations where Git will make an oops, and something will get committed or something will get moved or wiped or done in the wrong way. When I need to recreate what happened, it can literally play back what happened in the sessions and then just recreate everything exactly the way that it was. Because I have the session data, that recovery is incredibly simple.
But even if you think about that at scale, you're one guy building the software. If you had a team of people, whether the chance of clobbering each other's work goes up, having these replays actually is this great sort of insurance policy that's built in for free.
Totally. And one of the next steps I want to take on the coding side is really that Git management side, because it's such a nightmare. And my autonomous Git flow is great because it's really simple. I still want some flexibility to be able to be like, oh, I've got work on 3 work trees. Let's take this data and put it on another branch and then send that for review. And to have that not be an exercise in sleuthing and knowing what's going on, but to actually just have a real human readable understanding of what's going on. Really quick, I'll show you something I built for myself specifically for this. So if I go into Recursive, you can see that these are all of the touched files that have not been committed yet. And you can go in and you can see like what it touched. If I want to just stash all this stuff, I can just stash all of that immediately, or I can just one-click commit just this work.
And when you stash, where does it go, and how do you understand where?
I needed this for myself, right? So I'm like, hey, I need a visual way to interact with stashes and what it can do. So there's some cool stuff I built into this system too. So, if I want to revert work on a session, I can optionally stash the changes that happened since then, so I never lose it.
Yeah, that's great. Because I've had to stash many things and then I just lose them. I want to see my junk drawer of all my stashes so I can go back. Because sometimes I'll be like, oh, there's this little paper cut thing that I want to fix, but it's not part of the core work that's going on in that checkout.
This level of hey, I wanted this to look more like iMessage. I wanted stuff that was a little friendlier. I want to apply that same thing to the Git flow. I think there's a really big opportunity to just make things feel friendlier along the way and to just add more of that layman's context too. One thing I'm definitely going to add is a kind of auto summarizer agent. Having a summarizer agent that automatically runs at every turn you take in a session would be so killer.
It's almost like a foreman type of person who's overseeing the execution and is like, okay, here's what's about to happen, or here's the work that was going on before.
Yeah, and I really want that data written every single turn you take in a session. I want to be able to hover on a card here and get a one sentence write-up of the last thing that happened and a one sentence write-up of the broader goal of what was happening here. Then reuse that data in contexts like the activity for file changes, so that you just get more like a consumer app, because this is still pretty technical. Yeah. But I really, again, it's early.
Another use case, let's say that you had investors and every week you want to actually send out a report on what's been done. You could actually have the summarizer whose job it is to distill your progress against certain milestones. The synthesis to be here's why this is important. Here's how it's trending towards a goal or an outcome. And here's what our token spend is actually getting us. It becomes quite valuable in a way that looking at this level of detail isn't going to really help you to get an intuition of product momentum.
Yeah, let me show you. I built the inbox specifically for this because I've got a couple automations that run daily. It'll look at all the changes that happened in the course of a day, and it'll just write social content to communicate what happened. This is just an automation that wakes up and I think runs Sonnet.
It's super funny. I was just thinking about both craft agents, which we've talked about a little bit, but also Raycast. One of the things that's been interesting to watch as being part of the Raycast 2 beta, is one, how fast they ship, and then two, the presentation of the changelog. Their changelogs are quite beautiful in terms of the imagery that they use, but also the distillation of, bug fixes. I would say that craft agents usually presents a set of release notes that tie back to a specific bug or issue that's been recorded in GitHub because it's open source, whereas Raycast has that higher level, here's the benefit to the customer. And so it seems to me that going forward, we might expect that most software is able to self-report on how it's changing and evolving. And that software that doesn't have a built-in release notes or change log to give you the play-by-play of what's new and how their cheese is moving around actually will be thought of as a legacy thing.
I think the broader value is not even just in this formatting, drop a markdown, but automatically producing the imagery and the video assets for whatever it is that you're doing.
Right, exactly.
I actually have a plugin that I built specifically for that. And I've started, the next step, the thing that I've been working on is abstracting all these flows I built for myself into something that you can drop into any project and say, hey, I'd like you to start to build me videos and images of what I'm up to and include those in updates. That, I think my aspirational goal is I am fully letting this thing build everything that I have in my backlog while I sleep and getting a video in the morning for what it did. I have all the building blocks for it. I'm just trying to solve the lower hanging fruit stuff first of like, I just need this to be really incredible the first time you step into it and familiar if you've used any other code editor or agentic coding tool, and I'm just chasing down every little bug I can find. I'm ready to get it out.
Okay, so I want to switch gears because one of the other topics that we have is about once you have self-building software, what types of things might you build and go after? And it's not enough to like build a table stakes app. You kind of want to build something that ideally is good. And so I want to just talk about how the model companies are starting to actually like eat all these different software categories. Specifically, ChatGPT now does finance. They also built the health integration. One of the things that I've heard is that the ChatGPT finance app is not super great. However, the feedback that I saw on X about this was then followed up by one of the product managers on this saying, well, did you ask it or tell the memory how to fix it so that it repairs itself in the future? Now, maybe that's a paper cut that's a little bit deeper, and so you shouldn't launch a personal finance app that has that type of problem. But talk to me about now that you have this recursive system, you're going to be able to apply it to a bunch of different verticals. And so how or where do you see this going, both in terms of you competing with the major labs versus maybe not?
So let me just tell the long story very short.
Great.
The very short version is I don't put a lot of time or energy into my finances, and I feel guilty about that. I'm fine, but it's like I'm not actively managing things in a way that I think would be...
I'm sure that's true for a lot of people.
There are just some things that if you don't feel like you're an expert on, it feels like beyond you. I was like, man, I would love a lot of the core primitives I have in Recursive for coding applied to my finances. I would love to just have it wake up on a schedule and tell me how I could be changing, or looking at recent purchases, giving me trend lines, really going deep on a finance side that would be helpful. And this with the same entry point as being able to just go in and ask questions, but with some fixed UI that let me just go and get like a bird's eye view of what's going on. And so I had this idea. It kind of sparked I need to just get this mono repo. I need to split it out to a mono repo and actually do that work, which was really hard, way harder than I expected. But I'm actually at the point now where that's functional. And then you and I have been going back and forth about little things coming up here and there, because I really haven't put a lot of time into the financial app that I've been up to. But Friday, there was the announcement of ChatGPT Finance, and it was like, F this. Like, this sucks that, all these model companies are just going to try and eat everything. And my first reaction was dejection. I'm like, man, this is like,
what the fuck?
Like, what the fuck? Now, I step back from it for a second, and I'm like, okay, especially OpenAI, they need to figure out how to make as much money as possible, because they are blowing through just an insane amount of money. Then I dig into their product, and it's like, oh, they're actually just, at least right now, they're just answering questions in ChatGPT.
Take ChatGPT, connect to Plaid, connect to all your different sources. Now you've got financial data, and now you're going to use those as CSV inputs to answer questions about your finances.
Exactly. I think people want dedicated spaces that are really focused around doing one thing really well. You can build a habit around that. How am I going to build a habit around going to ChatGPT to sometimes work on my finances, sometimes work on a recipe, sometimes help me write an email, sometimes do this? It's like all over the place. And I think they'll run into an issue with that longer term, especially because the models just keep getting cheaper and better, and they're not the only game in town. And so while I was originally really dejected, it really inspired me to go back into this financial version of my app.
Because everyone has to build their own financial app.
Yeah, everyone really should. So let me share you.
They should try it at least once.
Let me share you. This is all demo data. You'll see through like a bunch of placeholdery stuff. But I essentially, and I've really just been trying to figure out UI translation between this and Recursive itself. But it should look really familiar. You know, a lot of this.
So it's got the recursive primitives, you've got the sidebar, you've got your sessions, and then on the right-hand side, instead of seeing a bunch of development-related tasks, we're seeing financial data.
Correct.
Being represented in charts, graphs, and other things that you would expect from a financial dashboard.
So this shares 99% DNA with Recursive proper. It has its own plugin system. I use the plugin system to pull in all the different data sources. And I'm actually just building plugins. In my mono repo, I've got plugins that are shared, plugins that are recursive only, plugins that are financial only. I'm just kind of iterating through the load system. You know, I haven't fully decided whether I want every one of these elements to turn on for financial yet. Like you could, in theory, have tasks that you want to manage around your finances. So I kind of leaving it on. The inbox.
Well, I would imagine that would be useful like during like tax season. You know, you've got to get, all your... PDFs.
Let me unpack that for a second. Right now, I'm looking at a high-level overview page. There's some charts for monthly spends, net worth over time. Everything you're seeing, I would say, is almost programmer art. Really, I haven't gone deep yet because I'm still iterating through the UX. You can see cash flow over time compared to previous periods, income changes over time, spending
that's a pretty
flow.
chart.
Yeah, from where the money's coming in and then where it's going.
What is the backend database for this?
There is no database. It is just files on the machine.
What?
Yes. So how
does that work?
Just because the hardest part for Recursive was getting it to essentially hot load data live from the folder, and then the engine would basically read to that data and then read that data back out. That is done. And so now the next step on the financial side before I actually release it is I'd like to wrap that data in an encrypted vault, which is just a folder that would have its own extension and it would be encrypted. I can have multiple accounts syncing in. You'll be able to have like a Plaid plugin or an MX plugin or a SimpleFin plugin, wherever your data lives. So tax, this is a new one that I was like, man, it would be really amazing if I could see, hey, what is my tax liability going to be this year? And I live in New York, right? And it can kind of break that down.
Now, is any of this, because as I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, cool, dashboard, but like, how do I talk to an agent about these things?
So basically, this should look almost exactly like Recursive for code, but this is for finances.
But it's for money.
This is Haiku. So I tested this with Haiku.
Wow.
The reason is it doesn't need to be incredibly smart because I have tools that it can call that are doing all the math.
So it's executing a tool call to essentially run this analysis on these static files that are on disk, and then it's presenting it to you. And so instead of the model having to be smart, instead there's a plot my income over time or my cash flow, and that tool knows where to look and then runs the assessment over CSVs, or what's the format?
It's assessing the data in memory, actually, like the cache data, because it's when you spin up your workspace, which has all of your different data types, because it's loading from disk, it maintains the cache. Right. Okay. So that's how it's reading it. But there's like also some broken stuff that I was just going through and fixing in Recursive. I was like, man, it'd be really cool for people that are in debt to have real visualizations around how to manage that debt. And the only reason why these are showing up as $0 is because as I learned in the kind of iteration with Recursive, in the demo data set that I'm using here, I had not set up the APY for the debt. So it doesn't know, it can't run that through the payoff comparison without knowing how much interest I'll owe.
It's like multiplying against zero.
But again, like I think what's really powerful here is my pipeline, because of Recursive, is essentially, wow, it would be really great to get better visibility or to be able to interact with this data set. What is an incredible visualization or way to get access to that data that would help me make a decision? What are the tools that I should have around that and the actions I can take from it. One of the things that Recursive went through and did is it built this really cool research page recently that shows me spending anomalies, drift in my recurrings, cash flow over time. This one's kind of cool, like a spending heat map.
Oh, it's like a GitHub style spending. Yeah.
And so you can see like, oh,
it's not check-ins, it's where your cash is going.
Yeah, you spent a lot of money on Wednesday, April. Now I've got the baseline for this. I am not worried about ChatGPT eating this because I just don't see how you could fit this much surface area in a generic app. If I could figure this out for financial data, there's so many cool potential opportunities to have a harness like this where if you could accurately maintain a file system around a specific vertical and deliver excellent work around that vertical, then it would scale really well.
So where are you with, one, Recursive being available for people to try and use? And then, do you imagine building, launching, and maintaining a bunch of, because I feel like you're almost on the same path that Raycast has been on, right? Like essentially, I think that's where Glaze came from, was that they realized that there's a bunch of special purpose apps that they need to build that, one, don't make sense as extensions in Raycast. And so they just kind of like took their fundamental node-based model with the hosts on the different platforms. And they're like, let's just give this to other people to build unique bespoke experiences. And they'll be cross-platform, there'll be distribution, and we'll index them in our store. And I just feel like you're like, I don't know, 6 months behind Raycast, plus another 5 years, plus like, probably 10 or 15 engineers. But ultimately you get to the same place where like you have enough abstraction. You're like, oh, everything is just, electrons.
I think the difference and kind of where I'm trying to get my head around it as I iterate through the financial app as a kind of proof of concept is one, I think my niche, if I was going to kind of carve out a lane, is like apps for working, like workspaces, essentially for whatever it is you're trying to do. So
like tool benches.
Exactly. So okay. Not, I think a lot of the vibe coding tools are more, I'm not trying to like downplay it, but I just think a lot of these platforms you end up with a widget in many respects. Like sometimes it's like either a throwaway app or it's like something really light or small. And it's very difficult to get something robust to accomplish a task. And, you said when you were building your IPA comparison.
It's called Coaster, by the way.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
There was a lot of discovery work. You use superpowers to go through and do the planning, and then you had some long-running agents. What I would really like to be able to do in theory, which is not there yet, is to say, hey, there's this vertical slice of an industry that I want to support, like this very specific thing. And here's how it works. Here are the main competitors in the space. Here are the tasks people are trying to do. Like, go do a lot of this research, right? Go do that loop. Come back, document the heck out of everything. Get everything organized. Go build a backlog in tasks, right? And then start basically cloning into a new app all the features and functionality that this vertical would like to use. And then we can iterate from there so that, when you ask for something, imagine if you got something as complex as like a real coding, like a real code space or a real financial space, but for whatever it is you're focused on.
Okay, so how available is this? When can people get Recursive?
So people can get Recursive now if you're a really early adopter.
Okay.
So.
And okay, what's the URL?
It's recursive.computer.
Oh, nice.
All of the screenshots and recordings on that page are taken by Recursive autonomously.
That's
There's
crazy.
A few that I need to go through and actually like give it some like deeper instruction on what to capture. That site's where you can sign up. It's currently early access and it's paid only for access. I basically only want people that are really going to commit.
Like serious.
I don't want looky-loos and a bunch of feedback. I'm not even sure if it's going to be free forever. I haven't really made that decision.
Sure. Well, but you have to, cover your token spend.
Well, exactly. I have a.
And you only have grants for so long.
I know. I have a commercial license available too. I think the idea is essentially it can rapidly improve and become flexible enough that people will really want to make it their core. And then it gives them the flexibility to basically swap out their agents and save money. That's where it's at. It's recursive.computer. I am pushing updates regularly. The auto updates are all working and hooked up. I'm excited for folks to go hands-on.
Well, this is great. I'm excited to actually start using this for Coaster. I'm sure I'll have some feedback for you for next
time. I can't wait.
Cool, man. All right. Well, this is great. Lots of stuff. And I'm excited to see how Raycast handles all this feedback.
I know. It'll be really interesting.
All right.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.